We'll go ahead and get started. For everyone getting the recording, if your calendar series expired, go to that link that you found it from, ak.ms/adaptive cards community call, and we're going to keep going. So we're in June. We'll see you in July. And as long as you keep showing up, I'll keep putting these together, and Dana will continue making sure that good content comes through and blogs follow. So I'm Matt Heidinger. This is the Adaptive Cards Community Series for June. And what we're going to do this month is recap Build and what we talked about there. I do have actually one update even since Build. So if you saw the presentation, you will still get some new stuff. And then I'm going to hand it over to one of our Microsoft MVPs, Hugo, who was on the SharePoint community call recently and heard that, there were some folks on the Adaptive Cards world who were asking about a SharePoint control. And he reached out and said, "Hey, can I show your audience?" And I was like, "Heck yeah, let's totally do it." I know it's come up a couple of times. So Hugo, do you want to say hi real quick? You and I have never even met either, so this is kind of a first for us. So we're going to wing this together.
Hi, everybody. My name is Hugo. I'm from Toronto, Canada, and I'm excited to be here today.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So, so that's what we're going to talk about today, a Build 2020 recap. I do have an update on the ACMS project, or the Adaptive Card Management Service project, that you may have seen in previous months, and then hand it off to Hugo for the SharePoint demo and integration and source code and all the cool things for those of you who are integrating into SharePoint. Okay, so with that, let's kick it on up. So Build 2020 went on. It was all virtual. If you hadn't followed along, there's tons of great content. The one that David Clow and I put together on all the latest adaptive cards can be found at this short link. And we really talked about these sections. So we talked about templating, adaptive card templating, and some pretty great designer updates. We talked about Adaptive Cards V2. It was the first time we ever used that moniker. And the major initiative going on at Adaptive Cards V2 is this concept of universal actions, which we'll talk about. And we concluded with a roadmap that landed with V2, V3, and beyond. The only thing I'll add to that is that the card management service, so we'll kind of go through that. So I will probably go quickly through this and hand it off to Hugo, and we'll obviously have time for Q&A. Especially if you've seen some of this content and had some thoughts on it. This is a great forum. Again, even if you have clarifying questions along the way, I'm going to be monitoring chat, and so will Dana. And there's a handful of people from the Adaptive Cards team on here as well. So if you have questions along the way, please feel free to add them. I like to keep these things casual. I hope you do as well. So with that, let's jump right in. So templating and designer updates. This was really the recap. I'm not going to spend any time actually going through templating. Hopefully you have seen it. If not, there's tons of resources to learn more at a lot of these short links, and all these will be added at the end, but I'll paste that one in. Templating, one thing I just really have to kind of always, wow, that pasted really strangely. One thing I always have to reiterate to folks is you can use templating today. If you're sending cards into Outlook, actionable messages, if you're sending cards into Teams, if you're rendering cards, templating is possible today, and it makes it easy to build adaptive card payloads with dynamic data. You create an adaptive card all the way back to, say, 1.0 on your backend or your server or whatever, Power Automate, whatever you're using to generate cards, and then you can send them to Teams. So it's a kind of common misconception that we see, like, when will Teams have templating, which is a fair question, by the way. And we get into like our V3 roadmap, when templating or data binding will be actually integrated into the clients like Teams and Outlook. But until then, you can absolutely use it today. If you're on a .NET backend or a JavaScript Node.js backend, you can use templating, fill these cards up, and send things. So we did have a breaking change in the binding syntax. It used to be just curly brace. Now it's $curly brace. We did that to align with other common binding syntax. It's the ES6 language. it just seemed a little more common, and it was a little easier to denote. It was also compatible with the second layer that we introduced called adaptive expressions. So this was a collaboration between the adaptive cards team, some folks on my group, and then the bot framework team. And this is a new standard for writing cross-platform, platform agnostic expressions that can be evaluated directly on multiple platforms. And there's a lot of potential here. So Tim Kadenbach, I don't know if he's on the call. There was a thread with him, Tomasz, and Luis on Twitter at some point, and Tim's been promoting this website madewithcards.io, where he has done some neat things with templating and expressions, including like taking an array of data and like filtering it and sorting it. And you can do a lot at the expression layer that is pretty powerful. And those of you familiar with Power Automate, you're already used to a pretty rich expression language there. It should be fully compatible between the two with minor changes. I think Power Automate uses kind of an @ symbol to break out into the expression layer. But either way, they should be pretty compatible, and you can do some pretty expressive stuff. Building a template, which really becomes powerful if you don't have the opportunity to change the data. Like, if you get data in the form of a current, like a decimal, but you want to display it to a user as currency, you want to round it to a certain amount of decimals. You maybe want to do some basic arithmetic to it, or like math functions, or just massage the data. That's where the template can get pretty powerful and really massage that data into a presentable format. With that, the Adaptive Card Designer got a bunch of updates as well. Data binding improvements. It's really easy to bind to your sample data. There's a new version selector UI in the designer, allowing you to actually, here I can quickly pull that up. So in case you haven't seen it, and then I'll actually pull up one other quick feature on vNext, so everyone can follow along with a lot of this as well. So I'm kind of going quick, assuming most of you have seen it. That could be a wrong assumption. But to draw awareness to something that has existed for maybe a year now is we have adaptivecards.io, which is where all of our production stuff lives, but we also have a vnext.adaptivecards.io, which just lets us play around with things, some experimental things. And one thing that's really neat in here, if you switch over to the vNext designer and you click new card, it's a little hard to discover right now. You actually have to click new card and scroll all the way to the bottom of this. There's this create from image, and this was built by a community member of ours, a group of folks from Imaginea, and they built this product and open sourced it, so it is in our GitHub repo. And what it lets you do is upload an image, a bitmap image, that they will send to a server and do some machine learning, some image analysis, some OCR, all the fancy stuff you learn to process an image, and they actually create an adaptive card for it. And it's pretty cool. So these are a set of sample images. You can upload your own image, but these samples just make it easy to demo the feature. And then I click convert to adaptive card, and what that's going to do is actually analyze this image. This is just a PNG image, could have been generated from anything, from the internet, whatever. And what's really neat about this is it pulled out the text, set it to a color, pulled out that image, horizontally aligned it to the center. It also noticed that these look like radio buttons, those circles. So it analyzed the image and said, hey, those actually look like radio buttons. So it turns those into an adaptive card choice set configured to basically be one option only. So pretty neat. It really just gets you started. The hope, I don't think, is that it creates a perfect adaptive card, but it gets it started, and now I'm in a designer and I can, tweak it as I see fit. And it's not perfect yet, and they'll readily admit that, but they're actively working on it. And it's kind of getting better every couple of weeks. And I think it's a really neat community collaboration that really makes it possible for designers and developers to have a little bit more of a strong handoff. If you're already familiar with a design tool, maybe you don't have to learn everything about the adaptive card designer, is kind of the hope there. So I thought that was a really cool addition. That's currently at vNext because it's not quite, production ready, but you can play with that there. And one nice thing added to the designer is this version selector dropdown when this loads up. So if you're currently targeting, say, Outlook Desktop, which supports 1.0 of the schema, you'll get these warnings if you use features that were introduced later on in 1.2, for example. And the toolbar element, the card element toolbar, filters itself to only show things that were available in 1.0. So you'll notice media is missing, rich text block. So it just makes it so the designer helps you create cards that are actually compatible with the host you'll be going to. And as you change to different hosts, we will set this drop down accordingly. So a bunch of little nice quality of life improvements in that world. Hopefully those were useful. And again, all these links you can get started with today. So the next thing was Adaptive Cards V2. And again, because templating lives outside, you can use templating today, works with Adaptive Cards today. Adaptive Cards V2 is our first major addition to the platform itself, the Adaptive Card platform, if you will, introducing a concept of a transport protocol and a standardized action model. And those of you who happen to write cards for maybe Teams and Outlook will be very aware of this current, I don't want to say limitation, but it's extra work you have to do. And the gist is we have an action.submit, which is a very platform agnostic. You click submit, and each host, be it Teams or your own apps, basically has to decide what submit means. And in Teams and web chat, in a bot world, a submit is a call back to your bot. They specially pack up the post, they gather up any inputs, and they create a post back to your bot, and then your bot can respond and send a new card or do whatever. Outlook extended the schema with a new action called action.http, and that lets you do arbitrary HTTP requests to your server. It can be a post, it can be a GET, it can do whatever, and that response is actually able to dynamically update the card. And that worked in Outlook because they already had a rich infrastructure set up that proxies the calls to make sure that you can't, accidentally call a service or leak user information or do things that they would kind of deem really bad for an Outlook user. So there were two different models that each had pros and cons, and the major benefit that we're doing in V2 is a universal standardized action model. So it'll be a new action type called action.execute. It will handle, I only grabbed some of the slides, so if any of this is interesting, I would recommend just going back to the build talk where you'll get more deep dive on all this. I'm really just trying to summarize a lot of it here. But the nice thing is now you'll have a standardized way of communicating back to a backend. It also has the ability to refresh the card on arrival. So, this is great if you want, the card to stay up to date at a certain sequence. And there's a whole bunch of stuff going on in the auto refresh world that we're still figuring a lot of this out. So this is one of those things that I would say stay tuned. The build announcement was a very early sneak peek. This will come and be available potentially at a preview by the end of the year, but released as early as we can into next year. The back end of this is going to be a bot. The easiest way to write a bot for Bot Framework is to just install the SDKs. If you've already written a bot, it'll make it extremely easy for you to now handle calls from Outlook. A lot of additions were made, not only just standardizing on the communication model back, but also responding, as in, typically if I click on a button and it approves something, the card will gray out and show the cursor. It'll communicate with your server. Your server will get all the authenticated state, who's the person clicking it, a trusted communication to your backend, and you can respond with a new card. So what's the latest state of the card and refresh it in a nice way. So a lot of progress towards okay, how do we actually communicate this front end with a back end? So encourage you to learn more about that. We'll have plenty to share on this as the year goes on. And the last topic is I've been calling it Card Author Services. I'm not sure if the name sticks or where we're gonna officially brand it. I guess I have Dana and I see Ben on the call. I should probably reach out to them and use their marketing expertise to figure out what the heck should we name this thing. You might remember it as the Adaptive Card Management System. So we had a set of interns through April, March, and February. Fantastic group of interns. I definitely miss them dearly. And they worked on this project that made it easy for organizations and people to just collaborate on a set of cards. So a very rich front end that let you log in, configure authentication however you want. This is a service that you would host yourself. So if you're a business somewhere and you would basically install this SDK, deploy it to Azure, AWS, your own server, deploy it however you want, and configure authentication. And then people can log in and create card templates for any types of things. And then there would be a backend library that would make it easy to fetch the cards from that. So rather than pasting, if you're a developer using cards today, you might go to our designer, create a card, looks like this, and then you've got all this JSON. So what do you do? Do you just copy it, put it in a variable somewhere? Do you store it somewhere? Like, we kind of leave it up to each developer to figure out, what do you do with this JSON? With the CMS, which is here, and I guess I'll just log into this real quick. There's a very nicely integrated front end portal where I can just click on new card. The designer is integrated. I always like to take this opportunity to mention to people that the designer, the adaptive card designer itself, is a component. So you can install it. You can embed it into your own apps. Just head to NPM and just look for the adaptive cards designer, and you can install this package. And that's exactly what the interns did. So I've got a card here, and I can click edit in designer. It loads up the designer, loads up the card. I can make changes to it and just say, hello community call, hit save, and then either publish it or whatever. And if I publish it, what's neat, and I can share it, all the things you would kind of expect, if an organization is collaborating on cards. Maybe you have non-developers working on these. We're slowly getting to the point where we want it to be so user-friendly that anyone can create actionable UI, and a developer who may have to hook it up to Logic or use Power Automate to do something with it, we can really start to empower all folks, all roles throughout an enterprise or an industry to really start democratizing a lot of this stuff. Like, just, I've got this card, I want to get to people. And so that's what this project is. So the update there is we've got some people working on it again. We weren't sure how we were going to continue working on it once the interns left. We did hire a couple of vendors to work on it. Not for long, really just a short amount of time just to get it so it works. Anyone can install it. I've done demos of it, but if any of you have gotten excited and tried to install it yourselves, you no doubt hit some hurdles. And so we're really just polishing that up. And that effort just kicked off. So that's kind of hot off the presses. But the good news is we've got a plan now where we can not quite get it like release quality, full compliance, and all the things that has to happen to go GA, but definitely to a point where you can use it reliably. So that's a pretty exciting development that happened since build. And then to really close this off, and then I'll hand it over to Hugo. This is what our roadmap looks like in kind of these block diagrams, or it's probably a lot to look. I've looked at this so many times. I just, I can see the matrix. I don't know how confusing this looks to you folks, but the way I like to summarize this is adaptive cards functions on really 5 verticals, the things we want to deliver. So we help with rendering, right? It's a cross-platform rendering layer. And in that world, what we're doing in this year is closing accessibility. We're making strides on really making cards fully accessible. It's an important thing to do. And we're all learning how to do that well and learn efficiently and just do it on every platform. So that's a major initiative. If you've been blocked on your rollout of adaptive cards due to any accessibility stuff, know that we've got your back there, and we're working to close that throughout the year. Input validation is our biggest feature coming at the rendering layer. So this will be client-side validation. So if you have a couple inputs on your card and they're required, you will be just able to say they're required. If it's a text input, you'll be able to provide a regular expression to say this is the format I want it in. If it's, you know, a choice set and things. And so that's a great improvement. It's by far our highest requested feature. We're making progress. You can actually follow along the pull request in GitHub. If anyone wants a link to that, if people are curious. We're looking to get a preview of that out in July, so pretty soon. And that's just, you know, great news for folks that have been, you know, or you have cards that are collecting data. We also want to get into glyphs. I'm not going to say much here because I don't have a high confidence that we'll be able to figure it out. It's mainly a licensing thing, so I'm not really going to break into that one right now. And we've also got a handful of platform inconsistencies that we're just addressing, just making sure that some people have gotten really creative with their cards, done some really advanced things, particularly since 1.2. And there's just a couple platform differences, some API extensibility point differences that we're just looking to kind of button up some of that stuff. So that's what's happening at the rendering layer. Then we have the action layer. So what happens when you click a button? And for that, we're making leadway through 2020. Like I said, you can expect a preview of the universal action stuff this year with final release in 2021. And that's what I mentioned is our 2.x. So what you'll start to see over time is that these independent, these kind of horizontal lines, they start to converge as we start to see, well, what does Adaptive Cards 2.0 look like? What does 2.x look like? And in 2.x, we're really we're combining the rendering and the action stack, and that will really make up what we call 2.0 into a unified SDK on all platforms. Universal actions will just work. The rendering stuff will continue to work, and you'll start to see that in 2.0. Templating will still exist as standalone, and the main benefit there is you can use it. You can use it with 2.0, you can use it with 1.0, you can use it with 0.5. You can use templating today. It's a separate thing. So we've released the release candidates of .NET and JavaScript. We'll be releasing those RTM within the coming weeks. So if you've been waiting for templating to exit preview, that's coming very soon. If you haven't gotten started with the release candidate, please do. We're getting some fantastic results from some early adopters. It's ready to go. We just want to make sure we're not missing anything obvious in the release candidate. So if you've been using the preview, please do let us know. So like I said, templating SDK is available for .NET and JavaScript, and then we're just now going to start working soon on the templating SDKs for the mobile platforms, and that'll get interesting very soon, and I'll explain why. We've also got the card designer that you've seen, the version selector, templating support, and we assume there's going to be some stuff moving forward, but we're pretty happy with the designer as it is right now. And then card author services, we're getting it to a stable state where you can install it and use it in 2020, and you can expect that to release in 2021. And that's, again, that's CMS. Now, to wrap this up, I did want to give you an early look at what we consider 3.0. And so I mentioned in 2.0, we're going to combine rendering and actions. In 3.x, what you can expect is the combination of rendering, universal actions, and live data binding. And this basically takes our templating language, which currently exists as a standalone feature, and integrating it tightly into the rendering layer so that data binding can happen directly on a device that you're on, directly on an iPhone, directly in Teams. You can just send data to these things. And the hope is that the data binding would be live. So as you update a data object, the card would just get refreshed and updated in lines. So that, I put in quotes here, our goal with this is, live, interactive, actionable content that can be presented to any user inside any experience. And that's what we've been trying to do with Adaptive Cards. That's kind of been our overarching vision. And we finally are starting to see the pieces come together where we can deliver on it. And card author services will get plenty of updates along the way, where with these kind of three components living together, Adaptive Card 3.x, card author services helping you, build up these really rich cards and then delivering them directly into teams where you just have to send data. You can have the template separate. It's really, I think, an open a lot of potential for innovation from folks on your end. Okay, 30 minutes. That was a quick-ish summary. I will go through some questions, and Hugo, this is where I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to you. So if you want to take over sharing.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Hugo Bernier. My company is Tahoe Ninjas, and this is a picture of me when I used to have a lot of hair. I can be reached at Twitter at BernieH, and my blog is tahoeninjas.blog. I'm Microsoft's MVP, as we mentioned before, but I'm also a proud member of the Patterns and Practices virtual team. And so if you haven't had a chance to visit the Patterns and Practices site, there's all sorts of resources around, tools, SDKs, and things like that you can use in your own solutions around Microsoft 365 development. I put the QR code there in the corner in case you're interested. But the other thing that I'm part of is something called it started as a Toronto Citizen Developer User Group, but we just renamed it the Citizen Developer User Group. Our focus was to create, a group that is not about selling products to people, and it's not really intended for the geeks. It's intended for the citizen developers, the people that want to make a difference in their organization, and they're not necessarily coders or developers. But it's also around having conversations with the IT decision makers and the developers around how do we empower citizen developers and organizations without creating shadow ITs. So we meet the first Wednesdays of every month, and the URL is at the bottom here, tcdoug.com. And while the primary focus has been around the Power Platform, we consider, and I hope everyone on the call agrees, that we consider adaptive cards absolutely a citizen development resource. And that's where the idea for this web part came about. So the web part that you're going to see today is actually a sample that's already published in the repository. I put the QR code there. The URL is way too long for me to even say it. If you are looking for that web part and you can't remember the URL, just remember to go to aka.ms/spfxwebparts. Again, the QR code is there. And so this is actually a site that we built that allows you to find all sorts of samples for SharePoint web parts using the SharePoint framework. And there's, as you can see, there's all sorts of samples, Angular, Knockout, React, everything. And the web part that's highlighted in green there is the web part that we're talking about. And as you can see, it was changed very recently, as early as, today. And that's what I'll be showing you today. So before I start, I want to say, I want to thank a couple people that sent me messages or opened issues as early as 21 hours ago to tell me that the sample web part that I had created, and Paul Schifflin also created a version of this web part, they were broken, or more specifically, the adaptive card template component was broken because of the May 2020 update. So I fixed it at the last minute last night. I must admit that it's a total hack, my fix, but I do plan on updating. As soon as there's an updated NPM package, I will update the adaptive card templating functionality. But you can use the new adaptive card templates. It mostly works right now, but you can also use the old adaptive card template schema. All right, let's show you the web part to get started. So this is a SharePoint framework web part, and it was totally built as an example on how to use adaptive cards in SharePoint. This is not really intended to be used in production, although if you choose to do that, you're more than welcome to do so. What we did do, though, behind the scene is that I created a adaptive card component, a React component that you'll be able to use in your own web parts. And the component, what it does behind the scene is it makes sure that it looks, the adaptive cards are rendered in a way that looks and feels like it belongs to SharePoint. It uses the fabric or fluid styles now, but it's also obviously responsive and reacts to fluent.
It is confusing with fluid and fluent. It uses the fluent design, right?
Okay. But it's also designed to changing themes and section colors of the web part. So when you drop the web part in, and this is actually the web part that's really running right now from my computer right here, and as you can see, it's running. When you drop the web part, it'll say, hey, let's get this configured. You need a template. And what we did here is we made it possible for you to pick from enter JSON here or enter a URL. For this sample, I'm going to use some JSON. I prepared some JSON, and try to do some shameless plugs here of here's where to go get the schema. Here's to get more information. We really wanted to make this as easy as possible for people to use. So let's get my first sample. I believe that's the right one, and we've made it easy here for you to edit with some syntax highlighting. And if I paste that and the demo gods are with me, this should be working. Yes, it does work. Okay, great. And while we're there, let's just show you how we can actually use, if I edit the section here and I change the background, well, it's probably not a very exciting demo here, but the background is designed to react to changing themes. You'll notice I have a little issue here with the highest contrast, the strong contrast backgrounds with the buttons are actually the same color as the background. This is something I'd love to talk to someone in the adaptive card team to align the themes so that we can do something that's high contrast and good for accessibility. And that web part also works if you go in a high contrast mode, and if the web part wants to work, you'll notice here adaptive card host, and if I take the same JSON that I pasted before, you should see that we have now a high contrast web part that also responds to the changing themes. Okay, let's continue. The other thing that I can do, again, I've got some other samples here. So let's use a sample with data, because we do support adaptive card templating. And what we do here is we detect if you're using adaptive card templating, we just kind of try to help you. So if you're using this, we say turn on adaptive card templating. And then from this, what we've done is we've actually given you the option to pick data from JSON, pick data from a list on your SharePoint site, or pick data from a URL. We are planning on adding things like dynamic data sources, so that we can have dynamic data from other web parts. But let's just start with getting some data. And let me know if I'm going too fast. I hope that everyone can see my screen. I do like my resolution to be really high. It's like 4,000 by 3,000. So I had to zoom in a lot to prepare for this demo. So if everything goes well, and Matt, you're like the adaptive card equivalent of Hello World, right?
Yeah, I guess. At conferences, sometimes I have to take selfies with people because they're like, "Wait, I didn't know you were a real person." I'll have my conference badge, and then I'm like, "Oh, all right."
That's right. So if I just to prove that I'm not lying here, I just changed the data, and I think I copied it. This is a picture of Paul. I think Paul is in the call. I want to shout out to Paul because Paul actually took this sample web part that I've created, and he really quickly created a React hook version of the exact same web part. And so if you're interested in learning about React hooks and understanding what's the difference between React and React hooks, great thing to do is just go look at my web part and look at Paul's web part, and you'll be able to see the differences. thanks to Paul for his help with this. And he's also added some of the cool features like loading from URLs. All right, let's go look at another sample here. So if I change my template here to something really boring, I didn't have a lot of inspiration when I created this sample template here. You can actually go pick from a list and you can get data. Now it's kind of hard to show here at this resolution, but it's actually giving me a list of, hold on, I'm going to zoom out a little bit so I can show you this. So I can get the list of documents here, and this data is actually coming from SharePoint. Now, to be perfectly honest, I would never recommend to use adaptive cards for doing something this boring. You know, in SharePoint, you have the ability to use list formatting and view formatting to do pretty much the exact same thing. But if you were inspired and you wanted to create a crazy template, you know, that at some point you'll reach the limitations of what list and view formatting is capable in SharePoint, but you can absolutely do it using adaptive card templating. So hopefully you have a better imagination than I do when it comes to creating templates. All right, anybody want to see some code? So I actually took screenshots of the code because demoing code in Visual Studio Code is always painful. I'm going to try to go as quickly as possible. Again, if you have any questions about this, feel free to reach out to me, but let's get started. So the first thing is in the project itself, I've created a web part called Adaptive Card Host Web Part. If you, and we'll talk about this later, but you absolutely have the ability to take the component I've created and you can drop that in your own web part if you want to. But this is the web part I just demoed. This is how it works. So the first thing that we do in this web part is we actually make the web part theme aware by giving it a theme provider and by getting the theme variant from the provider. And then we subscribe to an event so that when people change the themes or they change the background colors, the web part is automatically notified and it just makes the web part redraw. And then when we call the adaptive card host component, we just pass it the theme variant and the component will take care of applying the themes. Another thing that we do in this web part is that anything that's intensive in terms of resources, like for example, we have the code editor property pane that shows up. You probably don't want to load that every single time someone is looking at a web part, especially if they're just looking at it in view mode, not edit mode. So there's this feature in SharePoint Framework Web Parts that allows you to defer loading the resources your property pane needs to only when you need to display the property pane. It's a kind of crazy idea, but it works perfectly. So that's what we do here, is we just kind of do import the code editor in this case, and we only do that when you display the web part. And then we just set that in the property pane. Now, the component itself is really what's responsible for rendering the body of the web part. So the adaptive card host.tsx is where the logic for rendering what you saw. And you know, what we do is we actually, if we need a template, we use the PNP reusable control placeholder component that will tell you, hey, you need to give us a template. If we need the data, we do the same thing. We say, hey, you selected you want to use adaptive card templating, but you didn't give us data yet, so please give us that. And then this is really where all the hard work gets done. This is the component that we built that is really a wrapper around the adaptive card npm packages, but it is designed to work within SharePoint. So it takes the template JSON, it takes the data, it takes a flag whether we use templating or not, and it takes the theme variant. But the other thing that it does is it actually will bubble up any action element in the adaptive card. So if someone clicks on a button or a link or something like that, the web part that is calling the component will actually get notified, and you can do whatever you'd like with that. So in the adaptive card control, and this is again the control that we've designed for you to embed it in your own web parts if you want to, or you can use the web part that I'm demoing. We do a few things. So the first thing is we use the adaptive card. And now this is really stressful because I got Matt on the call and he's probably looking at my code saying, what were you thinking? So we create the adaptive card. We tell it to use the fabric controls, which is a great, there's an NPM package from the adaptive cards team that allows you to load fabric controls or Fluent or Fluid, whatever it's called now. And then we just parse the card. In the web part, because we wanted to support pretty much all every schema or every element of the adaptive card, we also use Markdown support because, you know, adaptive cards support Markdown. So we actually just, after we've parsed the adaptive card, we go back in, and if we find any HTML that has Markdown in it, we render HTML and we give you some nice HTML rendering. And this is the part here where we did all the work around capturing all the themes. And what we've tried to do is, and this is honestly, I just manually went theme by theme, and I tried to set up the host configuration to say these are the colors that we need. And so there's a few sections, for example, as you can see here, right here. Oh, it's not letting me highlight, so we'll just skip that for now. This part here, for some reason, I was not able to grab the success text from the SharePoint context. But, you know, in general, the theme works. Again, we do have some issues with the button color being the same color as the background color in high contrast environments. But I'm sure it's probably a matter of something I didn't know how to fix. And then the other thing that we had in this component is we had done a property field view picker that was responsible for picking the view from your list, from your document library. We've since then actually taken this out of the code sample, and we've actually moved it as a PNP reusable control. So the PNP reusable controls, if you haven't used that yet, you can go to this long URL here, or you can again go to the aka.ms/m365pnp, where all the PNP initiatives are listed. But this is a library, or this is a package, sorry, that you can add in your SharePoint projects to use all sorts of controls. And you know, but wait, if you order now, you'll also get in the near future, I'm planning on publishing the adaptive card control for SharePoint that you just saw inside the web part. I'm planning on posting it as a PNP reusable control. So for you to use adaptive cards in your SharePoint projects, you won't have to copy the code. You'll just use the PNP library using the package command here. I'm totally planning on updating this web part. Well, of course, as soon as I can do a permanent fix for adaptive card templating, I will do that. But in the plans is to add access to the service. Also, our intention was to add the card editor right into the web part, and I totally dig the creating a card from an image, so I might have to borrow that and put that in the web part. I'm always looking for ideas and inspirations. The goal here is to create something that will be useful for the community. So if you have any feedback, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. That's pretty much it for me, Matt. If anybody has questions.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm glad you covered the end about just making a reusable control. I think that's cool. I particularly loved the thorough attention to detail you put to walk people through it. For example, detecting when it looks like a template. The configuration options were great, including the additions Paul made to load from URL. I mean, it looked like a pretty solid, thorough user experience.
Thank you. All the cool stuff comes from Paul.
We'll just open it up to questions. I want to draw attention to this madewithcards.io. So some folks asked, is there a community collection where people can put some cards, how they're using them? So Tim Kottenbach, who has been a longtime supporter and innovator, I guess, within our community, made this website madewithcards.io. And that's really its point. You can submit entries here. That's where he's made some pretty cool templates, like showing filtering and sorting, and he's aggregating some blogs and guides. And I don't know if this particular website is open source somewhere, but I'd speak for him because I don't know if he's on the call here. This is like a really great stab at a community supported and community run thing. So if this is something that interests you, I'd say get in touch with Tim. He'll probably end up talking about this next month once he gets it a little more polished, ready to go. But this is really where we're hoping to kind of foster a grassroots kind of community thing for helping other card people or card users be successful. So with that said, any questions? I'm going to go through the list. If you have questions for me, questions for Hugo, please go ahead and type them or just raise your hand and we'd be happy to have you unmute. David, I saw a question if I scrolled back on Mac support for actionable messages. I don't know if you have an update there.
All right, I must have missed the question. I'm scrolling through right now.
It's like one of the first ones, so you'll be going all the way back.
Just give me a moment.
And then can this web part show in a Teams personal app? I think I saw Vesa address that. As I understand it, yes, this stuff can be shown in a Teams tab.
Yeah.
I'm not really familiar with what a personal app is. So if that didn't answer your question, Gal, would you please add some more context there and we can help with that one?
Yeah, it'll work in a Teams or Teams personal app as well. So right now you have to copy the code from my sample, but again, when we move it as a PnP reusable control, you'll just be able to add the package to your solution.
And for my own information, what's a Teams personal app?
It's a when you
call the static tab. Sorry to cut you off, but when you have a tab attached to the chat window, that's a personal tab.
Okay, okay, got it.
So as for the question on actionable messages, I think it was about where to find examples. So I don't have the URL with me, but we have a set of labs, as they're called, that are available on the document that are available on GitHub, and also very thoroughly documented. So I'm going to try to pull that URL and just paste it in the chat right here.
Okay, there was another one I think though on Mac support. It looks like someone added an admin message came out yesterday saying that Mac actual message will be available in the next update, so mid-June.
That's still as far as I know. This was the plan. Now with COVID and things like that, it might be that the plan has slightly changed. It's like right around the corner. The code is done, so it's really coming very soon.
Okay, cool. So Susan asks, Power Automate now has an embedded card designer for posting to Teams, and Team uses any chance this will also be applied to Outlook. I don't know if we have an update there. I know we are working with the Power Automate folks to get that. They're doing some evolving, I guess, of the way they integrate with the designer, and I think I'm somewhat speaking off the cuff right now, but I think the hope is to make it a little more compatible with the new template language that we've just announced, as well as the expression layer. So I think we're doing some tweaking there, and I have to imagine the hope is that once we have that figured out, it won't be team specific. Certainly long term, we'll make it very easy for you to send custom adaptive cards to Outlook as well, but I don't have anything confirmed yet. So Nor asked a question regarding cards and teams, conditional show and fill for the text area. So I think you're asking about client-side conditional show. So when a choice set is like other, please specify, I think you want a text box to show up. And unfortunately, that doesn't work at this time. The templating is a purely kind of one-time server-side thing. But that is something that will absolutely be possible once we add the real-time data binding, more client-side stuff there. So definitely stay tuned. That is a very key scenario we hope to add support for. And real quick, while I'm showing that, I'll have these resource links here. I think they were all in the chat. Thank you, everyone, for sending these links into chat. There are other community calls that we more than, as much as you want to keep joining us, we'll keep talking, I think, and keep engaging with you. So check out these other calls. I think, you can find these calls, at the M365 Developer YouTube channel. So this will be online there. The next call will be at January 9th at 9 a.m. It's always the second Thursday of the month. So please do come join us again in July. And I'll just add, I know we're wrapping up and people are heading out, but Hugo, thanks a ton for showing that. I know it's been hotly requested. Anyone else, if you have, Hugo just emailed me. He just, and my email is, I try and be available to folks. So if anyone wants to show things, let me know and we'll do our best to see what we can accommodate. So, again, I like to keep these things casual, and certainly if we can highlight folks, some work that you folks are doing, we'd love to do that. So thank you very much, Hugo.
And so the chat is closed now, I believe. So Hugo, if you want to get in touch with me so we can talk about that theming stuff, please don't hesitate.
Yeah, that'd be great if we can talk. I know it's come up in high contrast and things. So yeah, please do reach out to us. Last question, and I don't know if we'll be able to get to all these, so I might have to try and reach out to folks. Automated testing, we don't have any strong guidance on automated testing at this point. It is something we're starting to look at our end. Hopefully we'll have some to share maybe in the coming months, but really nothing that we've figured out yet. A bunch of chat on the theming and stuff when supplying the data via URL. I don't know if that was Thorsten may have asked a question to you, Hugo. So when supplying data via URL, is there a possibility to have an update interval for the card to update automatically?
Ooh, that would be cool.
That would be kind of cool.
If you scroll down a little bit, I did post the reply on that. So Hugo, we might get an issue in the repo on that. But I guess the question is, what's the real-time binding for adaptive cards roadmap? Consider that automatic refresh instead of
you might be awaiting a while on that one. I mean, we're currently calling it 2021 plus. I was gonna say, write me and I can write our bosses. I think we have a good plan. We just, it's just what resource, what can we do with the devs that we have, basically. So I would say, hopefully we'll have plenty to share as we get executing on the Universal Actions Plan, and that'll be our next major initiative right after that.
I'll add the refresh option in the version 1.1.2 or something.
Yeah.
Version 2.0, as I said, we were really planning on leveraging all the capabilities of adaptive cards because it's such an amazing initiative, like the card designer and the services and all that stuff. But that seems like something that we could do pretty quickly.
Cool. Awesome. I'm going to try and get through one question. So is adaptive card present for Angular 8? We don't have any native Angular SDKs. Okay, David's answering that. Yeah, so the JavaScript render should work. How close that gets is really, yeah. If you have any issues, do let us know.
We do not have a story. We do not have a renderer for each and every UI framework available for JavaScript. Like we would have to do Angular, React.js, Vue.js, and whatnot. What we've opted to do is a generic JavaScript renderer that can be used pretty much everywhere. And I can tell you already that Teams is a great example of a client that was written in Angular using our JavaScript renderer. And now Teams, I believe, is at least writing some parts of the product in React.js, and they're still using the same renderer. Outlook Web App is a React.js application and uses the same renderer. So it's really designed to be usable across all JavaScript UI frameworks. and you can even make it so that your specific Angular controls or whatnot are used in the context of what the renderer does. So let us know if there is any problem, but it's been done before, is what I wanted to emphasize.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I went through all the questions. Please reach out to us if we didn't get to anything. I'll just put my email on here. You can add into the Teams chat. Thanks everyone for joining, and we look forward to seeing you in July. And Hugo, thanks again for sharing.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me. Have a great day, everyone.
Yeah. All right. Bye, everybody.